Welcome to Live Free. I'm Angela K. Austin. Together, we'll discuss books, we'll explore the world, and we'll do it with some of my closest friends. And hopefully, we'll make new ones along the way.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is Angela K. Austin, and today I am here with Moni Boyce. Say hi to everybody, Moni.
Hi, hello.
All right. So I know a lot of you guys are familiar with Moni, right? So recently, Mahogany Silver Rain, Lawrence Hall, and Moni Boyce started a Facebook group that is dedicated to people of color who are writing. Right? It's dedicated to independent authors, readers, people who are writing and reading books by people of color, right? So when I joined this group, one of the things that I wanted to do was find out why they thought this was necessary. Why did they create this group, right? So we know there are books out there by everybody. There are major publishing houses who publish books by people of color. But why is it necessary for people of color to continue to try to figure out other avenues to promote, to have community, to share information, to teach and grow, or teach each other how to grow, I should say. So, Moni, before we get into everything that is B.A.R.R related, tell us who Moni Boyce is, who you are, why you write. Give us all the details of you.
Okay, let's see. So I write, for those who may not be familiar with my work, I write contemporary and paranormal romance. So I have 6 books out now, and a lot coming later this year. So I've been like deep in the writing cave. But I grew up a military brat. I went to University of Southern California and majored in film. And so for 16 years, that's what I did. I worked in film and like the event space out in Los Angeles. It was in 2016, June of 2016, that I sold everything I own. I left the US for a year and I went and traveled full time. And then when I came back in 2017, I decided that I didn't necessarily want to go back into film right away because I had started ghostwriting at the time to make money. And I got really heavily into writing and wanted to start writing also for myself. So I did a lot of educating myself at that time, marketing, trying to understand publishing. I'd actually completed writing a book before I'd left for that trip. So I actually picked that book up again and started going through the editing process and trying to get that ready for publication. And that actually became the first book I put out, which was Redemption of the Heart. So
you sold okay, there are just so many questions I want to ask you now that you shared that. But you sold everything you owned and traveled and then came back and you did ghostwriting film. Okay, so you guys
I know this. Yeah, they were like, you're walking away from a 16-year career, and I was just like, I don't ever feel like something's like closed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm taking a break. Now that could be a 10-year break, but film is my first love. Like, I grew up as a kid. Like, I was always like, my parents used to have to force us outside because we were just such like TV movies. Like I'm a twin. And so we both ended up going to film school actually together. We had a business together. She became an attorney when we were doing that. So she now works like corporate law, like doing that kind of stuff or whatever. But I was always like the very more creative, extroverted. So for me, it was always inevitable that I might trade another art form for something else, but I was always going to stay in art. So when I did sell everything I owned, because what I didn't want to be out in the world and have all this baggage, like physical baggage left in Los Angeles. So I did. I like sold it, gave it away, took it to Goodwill, like whatever I had to do. And actually that's what made me become, I'm more of a minimalist these days because of that situation, because I literally like at one point it was like, I had friends and family come and take what you want. I had a garage sale and I still had a mountain of stuff I couldn't get rid of. So I remember going into my neighborhood like, hey, if it's not like locked up, it's available. After that, it was literally like take it to Goodwill. And unfortunately, some of it did end up in the trash, like more like smaller things or whatever. But I tried to like make sure most things got someplace. But that's what made me like, when I come back here, I will not accumulate stuff like this again. I mean, I literally had stuff, clothes with tags on it, stuff that I bought that's still set in a box unopened. Like, yeah, it was bad. I was like, okay, I was tantamount to hoarding without being like the, you know, like things piled up like this.
This is kismet, because let me tell you what, literally 4 months or so ago, I did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I packed up. I wasn't gone for a year, but I am still leaving. But I literally sold everything, packed up everything, and I'm such a minimalist. I don't even know. I mean, literally, I used to have this rule of thumb: if I didn't use something in 6 months, I would donate it or do whatever. And I feel like now I'm even worse than that. I'm like, oh, why do I have this?
Yeah, because I tell myself, you have to give yourself a day. If you're still thinking about this piece of clothing or whatever it is, then you can buy it. Like, so I'm not an impulse buyer like I used to be.
Yeah,
only because I just have found, like, and especially now being a self-published author, when I realize, like, oh, I got ads I can pay for, book covers I can pay for, you know, and things like that, that it just doesn't. And even for me as a traveler, I mean, right now in the pandemic, I can't travel, but usually it was like, do I need that bag, or could that pay for a plane ticket? Or, you know,
it's like, that's my mindset for like everything I do. Like, a friend of mine was asking me recently, we were talking about souvenir cups because of a picture I had sent her. And she was like, do you still have that? I was like, oh no, I never bought that. That was just, you know, why would I buy that? What am I going to do with that? Where am I going to put that? Yeah. So it's so crazy. It's so interesting you say that. And, you know, and this leads me into B.A.R.R, you know, because what you said just then, like this or that, like, do I need that bag, or can I pay for this because, you know, I'm independently published? Literally, I just had that conversation with a group of friends the other night, because it was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this service because it was a newsletter service that I'm not using. It's expensive. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to move over here, switch to this one because this one is going to be cheaper, and, you know, and everything. And I'm like, and, you know, as somebody who's been self-publishing now, well, I've been published for 12 or 13 years, but I've only been self-publishing for about maybe 4 or 5 of those, right? And so there's so many things that we learn along the way that we take for granted, you know? So let's talk a little bit about B.A.R.R and kind of why you guys started it, because, you know, when I think of groups like this, I think of them what I love about them is that it's because it's people sharing knowledge that, you know, a lot of people just don't have. They don't know where to start. They don't know, they can't afford some things, and so they don't know what they do and don't need. You know, just kind of all these things. So I love these kinds of groups because people can just post questions and say, hey, what about this? And people, you know, can tell them their experience. So tell people what B.A.R.R stands for, and then tell us a little bit about why you thought it was important for this group to be, you know, to be started.
Okay, so for people that don't know, B.A.R.R stands for Black Authors and Readers of Romance. As you stated earlier, it was Mahogany and Lawrence and myself, and Stella, because it started in Stella's like Facebook Messenger chat. Like, some of us had mentioned, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was a group that you know, we could have to go to and talk about, like, the struggle, or post about, like, our, you know, new releases, works in progress, and that kind of thing. But we didn't want to just leave it to authors. We thought it'd be great to have readers be part of the conversation as well. Because especially for us as authors, you're always kind of looking to pick the brain of a reader, like, you know, what they're interested in, what they're looking to read. Because the thing is, there's tons of, anybody will tell you, there's tons of writing, like, author reader groups on Facebook. And the thing is, sometimes there's not, you know, and I'm a member of many and probably most of them, but there's not that many spaces for people of color to, I guess you could say, stand out. You can get lost in the shuffle amongst a group that's like thousands of people. And so you want readers that are looking for what it is that you write. But also, too, you're looking for other authors who know the struggle of self-publishing in a way that maybe, say, a white author doesn't. Not that most of the self-publishing struggles are not the same for somebody who's white versus somebody that's a person of color, but to give you an example of what I mean that's different is that, for instance, I write interracial romance, and most of the time I have the couple together on my cover. Now, for anybody who's a photographer even, you understand that there is very little stock photography of, first of all, people of color by themselves, let alone then an interracial couple together. So usually you get into this, like, what we call the head swapping when you're dealing with putting a cover together that, like, I hate doing that. I had to do it with my Oracle Chronicle series to make it work. Or throw together two authors to make it look like they were together or embracing, but they're not really. And I was like, dang, I don't want to do this. But, for a self-published author, getting into doing like a custom photo shoot or all those things can be costly. So it's things like that a white author doesn't have to deal with, because there's a plethora of things for them to choose from when it comes to that. That's why we felt that this group was important, was because there are certain aspects for us that become more of a burden than it is for our white counterparts. So it wasn't like trying to shut them out or like, anything like that, but it was just that we wanted to be able to speak to each other about those things, openly, or without feeling like, oh, I don't want to like make somebody feel uncomfortable or anything like that.
And this is very, very true, because, that's, people who've read my books, they know that it's very infrequent that I actually put anybody on my cover.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. I've heard many authors of color say that they won't put people on their cover just for the fact of they don't want to be passed by somebody because it's like, oh, they see a black person. It's like, oh, that's not for me somehow. I'm like, but we read white romances all the time. Yeah. So there shouldn't, and I know many of us have like heard the, different things that some readers have said, like that are like, we'll just say it, they're racist, because it's like somehow you can relate to a werewolf, but somehow you can't relate to black people finding love. Like, go figure. I don't understand.
I say that about readers, and I say that about publishers, because tell me how can you market a vampire, but you can't market a black woman who is looking for love, who
it doesn't make
family,
sense.
Who, you know what I mean? It's, you can't, as a person who has a master's in marketing, you cannot tell me that is a truism, because it's not. But that is one reason why I do like B.A.R.R, because I love the fact that people are sharing information with each other, because when I first started doing this whole thing of self-publishing, it was really because my publishing houses were going under. I was with like 3 different houses, and I shouldn't say going under. Like, one was just like stealing royalties.
Oh,
and it's like, and I'm still with one that I'm trying to get, books back from, because it's shuttering its doors. And I just found that as a person who has, like, I don't have any issue with self-promoting and marketing my books and things like that. I don't find that difficult for me, but that's because that's my background. It's what I've done as a career for almost 30 years, right? Yeah. So, but for other people, they are not that comfortable doing it. They don't know where to start. For me, what was difficult was, how do I format an ebook? How do I do this? For me, it was like, what about distribution? So I had to go and learn. I took so many online classes and so many whatever. And, and really it was one of the reasons why I started this channel, because every time I turned around, I had somebody asking, well, Angela, how do you do this? And how much does it cost? And what do you think about this? And I'm like, so you answer those questions so much that you're like, wait a minute, we just need to have a repository. We just need to have somewhere I can be like, go look at my video, because it's just so much. So when B.A.R.R popped up, I was like, this is so great, because you do see a lot of groups out there that are about indie authors, indie promotion, right? But a lot of times it's just about the promotion of the book. And what I like is I see that B.A.R.R is actually not only just trying to promote books, but trying to help people. Yeah. So, so when you guys did that, and when you started the group, because it hasn't been that long now. How long has the group been out there?
It's been maybe, maybe 2 months of that. Like it definitely hasn't been very long.
Okay, because it's a very, like, I found it to be a very active group where people are coming back and reporting how they're hitting bestsellers lists because people are helping them promote their books. So have you gotten a lot of feedback from readers or from authors who are a part of the group?
You know, it's one of those things that's like we're growing, because at the beginning we were trying to establish to like, how do we see this? You know, is it going to be a group that's heavy on this or heavy on that? Or are we going to try to balance? Like, that's why too, sometimes we have like theme days where we try not to make it so much about like, it's like we want people to promote and talk about their work, but we also want people to know that this is a room where you can come and ask questions about, like you said, publishing itself, and not just, because we didn't want to just end up being another promotion group, because it's like there's plenty of those, enough of those out there for that. So it's like we try to limit the days for actual like self-promotion to like Tuesdays and Sundays, because like Tuesdays it's like you could do a takeover if you wanted to for like 30 minutes to an hour, and talk about, you know, whatever book or books you wanted to talk about. And then Sundays like our Sunday share, and that's usually within a post, like drop your teasers and, you know, tell us about a work in progress and different things like that, or a sale you have going on. But beyond that, for us, it was very important that people feel like, oh, I can come here and ask questions. I can come here and get real answers, or like you just said, get support. Have other people, you know, agree to promote and talk about my book on their pages or in their private groups and things like that. Because that kind of thing is important. You know, I never want people to undervalue like the free advertising, because I think some people they mistake, and I'm sure you can relate to this as somebody, like you said, that has a background in marketing, because sometimes I have to try to educate people like advertising is free. You know what I'm saying? Marketing is where you get into like the paid stuff. So I was like, advertising, do that all day long. Meet up with people that, you know, are going to shout out your book on social media. Because I was like, all that's free. You want all of that. You want the word of mouth and people talking about it. You know, and it's interesting because as somebody too that like, I didn't come from marketing, but film, you do a lot of marketing. So having a film background for me when I came into this, there was a lot of stuff I was already very much like aware of, or just like the route that I wanted to go, and understanding like what it was going to take to be heard above all the noise of all the other books that were, you know, out there. Because I don't like using the word competing, because I'm like, reading is a different animal. It's like people are picking up books left and right. So I'm not competing with you. What I'm competing with is for people's attention. Not like, oh, I have to be better than their book, but just like, hey, look at me, I'm over here. You know, and so that's the other thing. And that's what I love about the writing community, is very supportive.
It's like, what I tell people all the time is, like you were saying, a lot of authors, when they ask me about, you know, how did I do this, or how do I do XYZ, one of the first questions I ask them is, you know, who's your audience? What genre are you writing, you know, within? And, you know, I start with those basic questions, because that tells me how much research where they already are, right? Because like you were saying, you know, when we're talking about marketing, for me as a person who, you know, who's done that as a career choice, marketing to me is strategy, right? And so it's like, if I ask you what genre you're in, that already tells me, you know, like you said, contemporary paranormal. That tells me a lot about your books, right? That tells me what time period, that tells me what your cover art's probably going to look like. That tells me about your sentence structure, your word choice. Whereas if I say I write historical paranormal, boom. You see, you know, so if I put my book beside your book, they should look nothing alike, you know? It should be like, but so when I'm talking to people about that, they just don't even understand those like kind of basics. And that's where that whole thing of marketing and, like you said, advertising, or what I call promotion, you know, which, you know, promotion can be that combination of a lot of things that are paid and unpaid. So it's like, when I talk to people about that, I'm like, see, this is where we begin. We begin at the beginning. And that's why I love groups like B.A.R.R, because, you know, even like I was talking with some friends the other day, I get tired of spending my money on all these different promotional tools that we use, right? You know, everything from virtual assistants to various softwares to, I'm like, people, tell me where the free stuff is, you know, and tell me, you know, where I need to, you know, so I'm always in these groups like, what are y'all using? Oh, okay, let me go check that out. And so I love the sharing of knowledge because it cuts down some of the research that I have to do, you know, and I feel like I can get, I can just be a little bit ahead of the game because I didn't have to like go through 20 different things to figure out which one I wanted to use. So I love that. So, I mean, good work with B.A.R.R, Moni. Really, really good work. And, you know, and I hope that, I know it's in its infancy, but I do hope, you know, that, you know, it'll grow stronger and stronger and continue to grow in its membership, and that people will continue to share and not just see it solely as a promotional tool, but as as an educational tool, so that we can all get stronger in the art or craft or business of self-publishing. So I could talk about that with you all day. So let's get to some of the stuff that's Moni. Okay, so we know you packed up. We know you did your thing, but like, why self-publishing? Did you ever try traditional publishers? Why did you decide to self-publish?
You know, when I came into this, that was always where my headspace was at, with self-publishing. I come from an independent film background, so I'm used to kind of running and gunning and doing all of the things to make a project work. And so in my mind, because that's the way I'm always used to kind of getting things done, I already saw writing and publishing in that manner. Like, okay, I've got to hit the ground running and learn all of these things, learn more about online marketing and do this. And it was funny because I went, my first RWA, Romance Writers Association conference, was in 2018. I went, and this was, I didn't have a book out, so I was like a, you know, up and coming author, I think was the ribbon thing that they had me wear. You know, and I didn't know what to expect, because coming from the film world where it's a little cutthroat and a little more kind of dog eat dog, and you're used to being pitted against either other women, other minorities. And so I was already a little jaded about, like, I don't know what this is going to be. It's a bunch of women, and like, who knows, it could be catty. Like, I was already like in that mode of like, I'm ready to deal with whatever's going to come at me. So, you know, I went because I was like, I'd heard, you know, like through reading about the organization, that it was great for people that were looking to write in romance. You know, so I didn't know anybody, with the exception of like one person I knew through like online, because we had been scandal gladiators together. And she'd written a book that at the time when she started writing it, was more of like fan fiction and like something that was being passed around the internet, but then like blew up and became a book. So she was like the one person I knew. I knew she was going to be there, but I hadn't even told her that I was going to be there at the time. So I got there, and like, when I say it was one of the friendliest conferences I'd ever been to, and people were, you know, they would see my name tag and see that I was still an unpublished author, and like, you know, ask me if I needed any help, ask what I, like you said, what I was planning to write in terms of tropes or genres, and, you know, they'd be like, oh, I have this person you have to meet. And then they'd introduce me to somebody else. And I still remember, and at that time, like, I wasn't very well versed in like who were the big, like, you know, top dogs that were making like 6-7 figures a year. So I kept being introduced to these people, and like somebody'd be like, oh my God, you know who that was? And I'm thinking, like, am I supposed to? So I remember one night somehow I inadvertently got invited to like this dinner that had like Kristen Higgins and like all these other people that at the time in my brain I still hadn't processed were like the, you know, like top of the top. And it was so funny because they were so incredibly nice. And I still remember Scarlett Cole, who writes military romance, she, I think, saw how like unsure and overwhelmed I was by a lot of like the, not even just like overwhelmed by like the niceness of everyone, but, you know, they all knew at the time that I was planning to just self-publish. And I remember she came over to me and she like takes my face in her hands and she's like, you are so worth being here. She's like, you, because they'd heard me talk about the book, and so they knew it was about, she's like, you are going to be brilliant and amazing. And I literally just broke down in tears because I was just so overwhelmed by like the kindness and the generosity and the encouragement of these women. And I was like, in film, it was rare. I won't say it was never like that, but it was rare to get somebody who was eager to mentor or reach out and just be like, you know, like support, you know. So for me, that was very overwhelming. I was not expecting it. You know, and they encouraged me to do, every year, usually RWA has like a speed pitch session where you get to sit in front of like agents and publishers and that kind of thing. And so I did that, even though in my mind I was still just like, okay, I still think I'm going to self-publish, but I'm going to go through this because you guys talked me into it. You know, so I went through it. I sat in front of Liz Patelier. I think I always totally mispronounce her name, Liz. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I sat in front of her. I sat in front of like Harlequin. I think it was like HarperCollins. And a lot of them were interested in Redemption of the Heart. The thing is, within traditional publishing, you have parameters. For those of you that aren't aware, usually there is, like in contemporary romance, a book is usually anywhere from 80, maybe 90,000 words is kind of high, but usually within those parameters. Redemption of the Heart was running at 110,000 words. So they were like, is there any way that you'd be willing to cut, or could you cut? You know, because they were all interested in reading the manuscript. And I was like, man, I don't know. Like, so I remember coming back from that and getting beta readers. Because I was like, if they're interested, I'm willing to try to go the traditional route and see. But I had 3 different beta readers that came back, and all of them were like, if you cut out like 20,000 words of this, you're going to have to rewrite the story because it won't work. So at that time, I was like, you know what? This just isn't the book then for traditional publishing. I'm going to move forward with my self-publishing plan. And that's what I did. I moved forward with putting Redemption of the Heart out on my own. I took courses from like Nick Stevenson on like, he had like a mini course on like Amazon and Facebook ads. And so I took that to kind of prepare myself, you know, and that kind of thing. And I really did. I mean, I put up a pre-order. I had a serious campaign laid out that I like followed to the T. And when I say like, you know, that book, I sold like, like 2,300 copies of that book in the first month as a unknown self-published author. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things of what traditional does, obviously that is small potatoes, but I have to say, I'm not usually somebody that pats myself on the back, but I was very happy with that because it exceeded my expectations.
You know, I've had a lot of people who I posted on this channel, and we talk about that. We talk about how the books that we write are just a little bit on the outside of what traditional publishing houses are looking for, right? Whether it be because of our character choices or our length, because when I first got started in this game, Moni, it was a lot of the publishing houses didn't want anything, of course, less than 50,000 words. That's what they looked at as like a, you know. And so, but depending on the genre, it could go up to 120,000 words. So you had to be, you know, you had to be in that 50 to 120,000. But that 120,000, like you just hinted to, is rare, right? Because it's
if you're getting in there these days around that word count, it's like fantasy.
Yeah, it's got to be, and that's a thing, guys. So when you're out there and you're trying to figure out where you fit, if you really are interested in that traditional publishing house, then you have to make sure that you know what they want. And, you know, if you can make what you write fit that, or if you just kind of want to write in your own kind of like, you just put the words on the page and the story comes out and you just tell the story you want to tell, you know, which is where I fell because, you know, I did try traditional publishers and every once in a while I have friends, you know, who are kind of hybrid. They go into the traditional publishing world and, you know, straddling that is probably where that space where a lot of people are moving toward, because then you still have that freedom to write those stories that you want to write. But then, you know, if you can fit, you know, that square peg into the round hole once in a while, then you can get it with that traditional publisher. But that is a thing because, you know, everything that, you know, we've been saying here, you know, not putting people of color on your books or do because, you know, the limitation in stock art, you know, trying to make your books fit with traditional publishers. That stuff is so much harder than you guys really can believe because I used to just chop the heads off of everybody.
Yeah, no, that's real talk. Like I keep Pinterest boards where I look at that kind of thing. Like, okay, where can I get away? Like if I was going to chopped off a head, or, you know, maybe it was just like the eyes or nose or whatever that you saw on down, or, you know, different things like that, because that's the truth. Like, you're only because too, there's like how many of us that are Black authors that write in romance, and only but like this much, that much like stock footage out there in terms of people to put on your covers. So the thing is you're trying not to look like everybody else's cover, so you're trying to find a different angle or different things like that.
I have been fortunate in that, probably because I don't have as many self-pub books out there as a lot of other people, that I can be real specific with my cover art, because I do kind of use imagery instead of people, although I might start moving into people a little bit more because of the sales on this last book that I did. Like, hey. But it's just one of those things where it's like, because I remember, and I may have shared this before, guys, but I remember a reader telling an author once that, they saw the same cover so many times, they didn't realize it was different books by different authors, because it was the same piece of cover art. And it's really just one of those things. When you are a self-pub author, you did it for a reason, but it does give you some limitations. So, 2,300 copies of your first book, you should be extremely proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's now done like, I'd say probably close to 6,000. I mean, that book has been out since January 2019, but I mean, in the first month to have that hit that number, like, I was definitely excited. And it was funny because other people that have kind of learned my story with that book or whatever, sometimes hit me up privately and they're like, what did you do? Like, especially as a self-published author, like, can you share like and I was like, I will tell you everything I did, but I was just like, I can't say I've actually been able to duplicate that again yet. That number of like, books in a month or whatever especially at the beginning like that. I was like, I wish I knew exactly like but it's just one of those things, you never know what book is going to hit and why. You know what I'm saying? And the other books have been successful. Like I said, that book just like took off in a way that I didn't expect.
To be honest, I think we all put so much love into our first book. And so, like, when I first started in this game, I had a publisher. And, the publisher was a small press pub. And because they know how hungry we are when we get that first, you know what I mean? And so, like, the publisher wouldn't even put the book on Amazon or any of the main outlets. People had to buy the book from the publisher.
Oh, wow.
So, of course, then that means you got to buy it from the publisher, upload it to your e-reader or read it on because they know we are hungry. When we first get that first book, we promote it like crazy. You don't even have to know what you're doing. It's just, you got a book out there. People buy this book. You know what I mean? And you tell everybody, it's, and that's the thing. And that's what I call promotion. So for any of you guys out there wondering like, what is all this difference? Of course you can Google it, but when I talk about promotion, I talk about paid media, paid advertising, and I talk about unpaid, where you just have like, whatever your newsletters, your co-op groups, your Facebook, your social media, things that are unpaid. But that combination of all of it, that's what gets you, to that 2,300 or whatever. But it's
I did a lot of paid promotion for that book. Like, let me be clear, like on that, like I did Facebook ads, I did BookBub ads, I did Amazon ads. I was usually spending like $10 a day for like a few weeks at a time, and then I did the paid promotions, the Fussy Librarians, the free book well, not free, but their other was a bargain book arm and that kind of thing. E-reader news today, like I did a lot of that type of stuff as well. So it's like, and that's the other thing I'm always trying to tell people. I'm like, yeah, definitely do all of the free that you can. But if you expect to hit certain numbers or make certain amounts of money, then you've got to do some of that paid stuff, because you just can't with just like word of mouth and the free stuff alone. Like, you've got to be willing to put some, money into the mix to make that happen, to get basically to get your book to have a further reach than just like the immediate, almost like, people that are in your circle or connected to you somehow on like a social media platform.
And it does break my heart, because even just then you used a term that a lot of people don't understand. You used the term reach.
Yeah.
Right. And when I say that to people, they're like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I know.
And then, and
I have to say, let me apologize just really quickly before you get into that, because sometimes you have a certain knowledge base. It can be hard to like try to remember that everybody's not at the same level that you're at. So I apologize if I use terms or different things like
that's
that.
quite all right. That's why you guys who are watching this should join B.A.R.R. But you know, it's just that term, because a lot of people, if I say that to them, they don't understand it. And then a lot of people, they'll be like, oh yeah, well, you know, my friends didn't share it, and my whatever. I'm like, but okay, did you expect them all to share it? You know, this is your dream, not
exactly.
You know, and so you do need to understand what some of these terms are. So the homework assignment for tonight, look up the word reach, you know, and then come back and tell us what it means. But I love that, because, you know, that's the whole thing, is that people need to understand that. Because if you don't know what genre you're writing, then you don't know how to set up that marketing strategy. And if you don't know how to set that up, then you don't know what you don't really know what that mix should be, you know, between that paid and that unpaid. You don't know where to post. You know, you don't know what the messaging or tone of your messaging should be. So, and then you start to send out mixed communication and information, and people don't know really what your book is about.
Exactly.
So, you know, then you don't end up with the sales that you think you should have, because you are the world's best writer. Yeah. You are. We all are. So,
but it goes into your, like what you were saying, like your ad copy and even the blurb that you put on your book can affect, you know, your sales.
It really does. But you know what? The thing is that when you've been doing it for a while, you don't even realize how much you've learned compared to somebody who's new. Because, like, even I have a book that I'm working on right now, and I was talking with an author friend, because I'm working on the blurb. And I'm like, well, this is really more in women's fiction than it is in romance. Now, the reason I say that is because of the way I tell that story. It's really more about the woman's journey. So then that brings a question in. What should my blurb be? Because romance is usually 2 points of view.
Yes, exactly.
It's heavily on one point of view. So if I put it out there with one point of view, some people will be like, well, what about the man? Is there love? It's women's fiction. There may be love.
It's not the main storyline, and that's the other thing is, like, you know, and I try to tell people, I was like, educate yourself as much as possible. Like, you cannot be afraid of learning and, you know, jumping on YouTube, watching videos like yours, you know, getting online and Googling things, because, and you know, let me jump off topic just for a second, because I see this all the time in groups. Do not pay for publishing. Let me say it again. Do not pay for publishing, for those of you in the back. Publishing is free. Any of these platforms, they will walk you step by step on how to upload your book. So do not pay anybody to do that part of it for you. When we talk about self-publishing, what you should be paying for are book covers. If you're not a book cover designer, please, I beg of you, do not. If there are people on Fiverr that you can pay $10 and $20 to that have that background that will do a decent cover for you. But please, for the love of all things, like, if you want your book to be picked up, because again, a lot of readers read with their eyes first on those book covers. So if your book cover, you know, and this is where I tell people in terms of when we talk about market research, go look at what's in the top 100 of whatever category on Amazon that you're going to write in, whether it's contemporary, African-American romance, you know, historical. Look at those covers. What is it that's on them? Like, is it a, you know, like historical, it's usually always a couple, or it's like, you know, the man or the woman, like in some kind of pose or whatever, you know, and that kind of thing. So make sure that your cover looks like, because again, you're competing for people's eyes. If your cover doesn't look like one of those, then guess what? You are not going to get as many people as you'd like to think picking up that book. The other thing that you should be paying for, or at least like get as many people as you can, editing. If you can't afford, I know editing can get costly, but people, like, get some proofreaders, people that you know are decent in like English and grammar and all that, and let as many people as you can look through it, proof it, and that kind of thing. Because again, that's another thing that will trip you up. You don't want to have people in those reviews saying I didn't like it because it was full of typos and errors. You know, it's one thing for somebody to have a comment about like your plot, but you don't want it to be, you got downgraded some stars because your book wasn't edited.
You know, and this is like, and all of it starts with some basics, guys. What are you writing?
Yeah.
You know, do you know who you are writing for? Because if you can't answer those questions, you know, all this other stuff is going to be even more confusing to you, you know. So have these conversations, you know, join organizations like B.A.R.R and so many others that are out there, and start asking some of the basic questions so you know where you are before you put the book together and throw it out there. Because, you know, I go on, like you said, Moni, so many people shop with their eyes, right? Because you get this little thumbnail, right? So you're scrolling through your Kindle or whatever your e-reader is. You don't know. But I look at so many self-pub authors' books, and there's so much conflicting information in the art. I can barely read the author's name. You know, I don't have a clue what this book title is. It's got so much stuff going on. It's so busy. It makes my head hurt. I'm over it. I don't even want to click on the thumbnail. I don't even want to read the blurb. I don't care, people. It's too much information. You know? So start with the basics. Find yourself a good organization filled with people who you trust and you like what you see that they're doing. Because why copy the work of people who are not, you know,
exactly.
You know, so, you know, join an organization that you actually see people are putting in effort and energy, and you see where there is actually some progress and production coming out of it. Find a group where you fit. Don't just join because people told you, oh, you should be a part of it. Find one that you really are getting something out of.
Agreed.
You know, we could have a whole conversation, girl, on marketing.
Oh yeah, no, real talk. Because that's the other thing. I mean, as you get better at it, and you and I both know, the marketing actually comes before you even finish the book.
Yes, it really does. It really does, guys, because I swear to you, you know, if you don't know what you're writing, you don't know who you're writing to, if you can finish a book, you be like, I love this. This is such an awesome book. But who are you marketing it to? What is that? You know, you'll sell 2 copies and be back. Like, why didn't nobody? It's like I literally interviewed an author about that a few weeks ago. You know, and that's a question that I normally ask a lot of authors, and I may have to ask it of you too, Moni, but it is always, what's your favorite book? And categorically, every time I ask that of any of the authors that I interview, they're like, yeah, it's my book that sold the worst. It's like we're writing that sucker for ourselves, you know, and nobody bought that bad boy. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's like, what is this? You know, like, it's a masterpiece. Don't you see my genius? But like, you know, but let's talk about your books a little bit. That was a great segue there. Let's talk about, because like I said, I love to ask authors what their favorite book is. But before I do that, let me ask you, what do you think readers, what's the book that you think readers love the most that you've put out there so far?
You know, it's because I write in 2 genres. It's interesting because I have a lot of people that read both on both sides of the fence, but then I get my strict, like, I only read the paranormal, or I only read the, but I have to say, so it's a little bit of a tie. I would say, like, Redemption of the Heart probably wins out a little bit more than Awakened, but I do get a lot of people saying how much they enjoyed Awakened. But I do have to say, I would say Redemption of the Heart. Like, even though that book is, like 18 months old at this point, I still get a lot of, and I'm still getting reviews even now, which is kind of, like, usually it's hard for books, like, of a certain, like, age, I guess you could say, to, you know, keep getting reviews or whatever, but I have, like, ones, you know, that are now, like, 2020, you know, reviews or whatever, versus just ones from 2019 or whatever, and I still get people that, like, Add the Blue will either message me or you know, tell me how much they really enjoyed that book. And that means, like, a lot to me. That book was kind of personal, because I like I said, I wrote it before I left the country. And at the time, I was working in film. So I was working a 16, 18-hour day. I would usually come home at, like, 1 o'clock in the morning, and work on that. And funny enough, like, I started out at the time, like, I'd gotten divorced, like, years earlier before that, but I was always a bit of a workaholic, so I didn't really deal with being divorced. And some friends encouraged me to pick up writing again because many of them knew that I was a writer. And so I started out with poetry and then got into fan fiction. And then I found this website where a lot of women of color, it was called Download Chamber. I think it's still around. I haven't been on there in a little bit, but a lot of women were posting original stories and letting people read it and critique and give feedback. And so for a while I started out as just a reader, and then eventually I was like, oh, I'm going to write something original and put on here. So that's how Redemption of the Heart came to be. I started writing I would come home literally like 1:00 in the morning from work, write like a chapter while I was sitting in front of the TV, because that was kind of my way for me to unwind from like a very stressful day, you know. And because that book is very heavily about forgiveness, that was an issue I was kind of dealing with at the time in my own life, was being able to forgive. And so like that was one of the reasons that was very close to my heart, was because it was something I was struggling with. And so like I said, I would write like literally a chapter a night. Like at the beginning I was like on it every night, and then like just do the work and life stuff, I started falling off a little bit, and I would come back to it. So it took me literally like a year to finish that, like a piece at a time or whatever. But before I left the country to go travel, I had a finished book. And at the time I still had no like plans to put it out anywhere, so it just kind of sat. I would still say Redemption of the Heart is still probably one of my favorites because it's so personal.
And I can understand that, because I think my first books are the same way. But you know, I tell people that they're so like babies. You get it, you put it out there, and you're like, oh, you know. And then it like warms my heart every time I get a review and somebody's like, oh God, I'm like, they connected with my baby, you know, because I love that they got it. And,
Yeah.
you know, and some stories are a little bit personal. You know, they're not necessarily me, but your emotions, things that you felt and, you know,
Exactly.
wish for and hope for. So some pieces are in there. And so when people connect with it and it does well, you know, I think it's just, you know, really, really, I don't know. I love it. It always brings me a lot of joy. So, but what about you? What book have you written, or have you not written it yet? Are you currently writing it? What's your favorite thing that you've written so far?
I would have to say it's actually probably one of the ones I'm writing. It's a little bit of a labor of love, because again, it's something that's based on a little bit of something that's happened in my life or whatever. Not like this one's not anything bad, but it's funny because I had this 7-year, I guess you could say, friendship with this guy online. That was very like kind of public. People would jump into our conversations, but literally we would talk like every day, and sometimes for like hours throughout the day. Like we would just be like having these conversations, and all my friends were, you know, I think kept expecting it to turn into something like romantic or whatever. And it was just that, like, we started talking at a time in my life. I mean, again, it was like shortly after my divorce, and it was literally like he played some song on his Twitter feed, and I was like, and it was kind of obscure. Like, I was like, most people won't even know that. And that's how like our conversation started. So a lot of it was like based on music. Like we would share music back and forth. There were times we would literally sit and watch movies together and like tweet about it to each other. And so like, my sister was like, she's like, you should turn that into a book. And I was like, why? But then it's like, the more I started thinking about it, I was like, actually, that kind of does make a great, like, epistolary type of book. If it's told like mostly in the vein of them talking to each other through social media. So it's like, that one, because of like the format and style of it, is a little bit different. So, and it's one of those books that for me, because it is kind of personal and based on something that's real, it's taking me a little bit longer to like actually put on the page and also change aspects of it so that it's different enough that it's not so, I guess you could say, close to home. But that's, in my heart, that's like my favorite, because I'm enjoying writing. It's a lot, because obviously it's very dialogue heavy. So you want that to feel real and authentic. And so I'm having fun crafting these characters in the way that they would talk to each other, and how that evolves too, because it becomes different, you know, it becomes more familiar and like easy and different things like that. So it's like finding that rhythm and things that you want it to feel real. So that actually has been my favorite. Like that's my like baby, that like right now it's like I write a little bit here and then I put it away because I've got other obligations to complete, but that's like my heart right now.
You know, that's one of the things that I continue to be amazed by. like so many things for me that turn into books, you know, just come from like these kind of like weird little everyday kind of things that are happening, you know, so like you say, that's close to home, but it'll be something that you'll shape it into something that's totally different than what the reality was, but you'll use that piece of reality, you know. And I love that because even when I wrote my book Before I Leave You, that was like a dream. A piece of that was a dream.
Oh, I love that.
And then it was like, I took that dream and it was like, oh, I could do X, Y, Z. Because I'm one of those people who keeps a little book by her bed, you know, so like, it's like I keep a book by my bed so that I can, you know, so I can be like, oh, let me get that in there. Because I forget my dreams. So that
I barely remember them.
I barely remember them. And it's like, oh, so when I wake up from, you know, and if I do have like an awesome one, and I actually have like a piece of a story that also came from a dream that I'm working on. And I love that. I love seeing how other authors come up with ideas.
No, wait, I'm the same way. It was funny because I got asked that in another interview once. I was like, ideas come from all over the place. I was like, I could be watching a movie and it could be something that somebody said in it. And I'm like, and I get like stuck on that line and it evolves into something more. It could be from a mood I felt in a song, you know, or even just seeing different scenarios, or like, for instance, one that I'm like, this is an idea that I'm like kind of brainstorming on right now is based off of Jason Momoa and Lisa Bonet's relationship, because he just recently like rebuilt a car for her, like it was like her first car when she, you know, like had first been on like the Cosby Show, and it's this cute like 8-minute video of him like getting it rebuilt for her and then like her reaction to it. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to write like a couple that, you know, is kind of like this bohemian like love that they have or whatever. And so that's like an idea that I'm kind of like toiling around with. I don't know like when it's actually gonna fully take shape, but it was something that came into my head or whatever. And so like for me, I find inspiration like you said, all over the place.
I think I could talk to you for so much longer, but tell us what's next for you. So we know you've got some stuff that you're cobbling together, some ideas percolating, but what do you have? What should we keep our eye out for?
Okay, so there's a lot happening before the end of the year. So I'm planning to put out the first book in my motorcycle romance series. So it'll be 4 books in total once it's all said and done in terms of published. But each book can be read as a standalone. It's about a brother within the motorcycle club. So that will be one of the first ones that I'm trying to have that out by end of September. Then I also have a Christmas book that'll be out in November. That's part of Very Alpha Christmas. Like it's part of the season 2 of that, because they'd done a season 1 last year around Christmas time. Mm-hmm. Then I have one anthology that's the Big City Heat one that will have a novella that's like a mafia romance, enemies to lovers, fake relationship. That'll be the start of a trilogy. So then book 2 of that I'm trying to have come out at the end of October. I'm like, there's something else. Oh, and then another book that I can't say just yet because it's part of a group of other authors or whatever. We're kind of premiering them in September. But that book will be out in November. That'll be a contemporary romance though. And it's a kind of, I guess you could say, like second chance enemies to lovers story. Yeah, I have to say, like I especially right now in the pandemic, I write a lot. I literally like wake up almost like sometimes before I even eat, I will like sit in front of the computer and write for a little bit.
And so I'm usually that person who's up at 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'm like, wait, I should probably be going to sleep right now. What's really going on? But it's when you get into a really good groove.
Yes.
I'm one of those people where I hate to stop it. I'm that person who likes to write until the writing stops. And then I write a little bit past it.
Yes.
You know, so that when I come back the next time, you know, the next day, I'm like, okay, yeah, you know. So I always do like right up until I just bump my head right into the wall.
You know, a lot of people sometimes don't understand that, because I'm like, when you get into the rhythm as a writer, because it's like I try to write every day. And it's like, yeah, you're gonna have days where you might not use what you write or whatever, but I try to make it a habit. I'm gonna write every day. And right now, because I do have deadlines because of either being parts of books where it's like I'm part of a community of other authors writing in a shared world, or anthologies and things like that. So like as a self-published author, it's like, yeah, sometimes if you're writing in your own series, you can pick and choose when that's going to come out, or if you're going to, you know, postpone it, whatever. But right now I'm on some hard deadlines that I have to meet because I'm writing with other in other people's worlds and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's a lot of like, okay, I'm like I regiment. I'm very like, okay, from this time to this time, and because I'm working on multiple books right now, it's like from this time to this time I'm gonna write on this book, and then it's like I'll take a break, and then I'm gonna come back and write on, because part of it too is like I almost treat like my breaks as like a palate cleanser at this point in time, because it's like I gotta, okay, I'm going from contemporary whatever to now this or into paranormal, and that can be a completely different headspace creatively, especially when jumping into the paranormal, because now I'm dealing with like creatures and mythology, and there's a lot, not to say there's not world building that happens in contemporary, but there is so much more world building that goes on in paranormal.
If I feel like I'm starting to get stale, you know, in one genre, it allows me to totally like just jump out of it, write a totally different thing. And I jump from contemporary to historical, and I jump from women's fiction to, you know, romance. So it allows me, because if I have a story that is about a woman, her journey, and she doesn't necessarily have love, at least not at the beginning, it allows me to tell a whole different story. But then if I'm writing paranormal and I'm writing about a shifter, it allows me to be a little bit more whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, if I'm writing about witches, I can get, you know, I can just, you know, it allows me to just, I love it. It allows me to just.
Yeah, and then for me, I love it too, and it's because, you know, some people were like, oh, you don't have different pen names. And I'm like, you know, and this is probably just me being whatever, but I'm just like, if James Patterson can write children's books and mystery thrillers under one name, everything will be under Moni Boyce.
I jump from women's fiction to romance to paranormal, back again, and I do it all as Angela K. Austin, you know?
I love it.
It's a lot, people. It's a lot. Who's got time for all those pen names? All of the social media that you have to schedule and whatever. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. And speaking of which, Moni, tell us, what is your social media? How do people follow you, connect with you, and keep up with all of this work that you're about to put out there?
Well, I live on every social media platform with the exceptions of like the TikToks and Snapchats of the world, but you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, all under @Moni Boyce, my name. You can also go to my website, which is moniboyce.com. On Facebook, again, if you just plug in my name for like my author page, where I usually post like more information about like the actual books, you can go to Moni Boyce Writes, and that's how you'll find my author page. But yeah, I live pretty much everywhere. Like I'm on BookBub, Goodreads, like all of those. You know, usually just put in my name and you can locate me. I try to keep it as simple as possible so that it's not difficult to locate me. And that's the other thing with, if you ever get into branding people, make it simple, make it all the same on your social media platforms. It should not be different.
You know, people are like, oh, what are you on everything? I'm like, Angela K. Austin. They're like, but what about it? I'm like, Angela K. Austin.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know, I try to tell people, I was like, branding. I was like, I can't be like, you know, whatever crazy name over here if I'm trying to have people locate me as an author. I was like, it all has to be uniform. So I was like, it's all just my name.
Another branding 101, people.
Yes.
You know, make sure that people can find you, so they can find your work, so that they can actually buy it, you know? So don't confuse them, right?
Yeah.
Keep it simple, you know? And it's like, that's keep simple. Moni, it has been my pleasure.
I know, we have to just like talk even outside of this, because I love like when I find other people that are like doing the same thing and we have the same mindset. It's lovely.
Come on. I'm so about that because it's like literally as you were talking, I'm like, did I just meet another minimalist? Did I just meet one of my sisters in the ether? Yes, I did. It is like, I'm telling you, I was like, check, check. All right. I'm so glad that you joined me because, honestly, when I started this channel, I would reach out to different people and be like, hey, will you guys come and join me and talk, and share what you know. And, people say no. People are like, man. You know what I mean? And it's
like I want to pay it forward,
That's right, exactly. Yeah. I'm all about paying it forward because every book that I have managed to self-publish and sell, every single 99 cents. every single one, I would not have been able to do if there were not other women and men who taught me how to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I have no problem sharing it. I have no problem helping people. I was literally on the phone with a friend of mine the other day, walking her through like an Amazon ad, but then she walked me through BookFunnel because I use prolific work.
I've literally gotten on Skype and been like, let me share my screen. I'll walk you through the back office of how to do that. Because for me, I'm a visual learner, so I need to like physically see. So for me, since I learned that way, I usually like to teach people that way.
Exactly.
Because I do the same thing.
Yeah. And that's like, and even with this channel, because some of the things that I do on this channel are how-to videos. Yeah. And I will do just that. I will share my screen and record it and show people exactly what I'm doing,
Exactly.
So I have absolutely no problems with that. And so like for all the people out there who are listening to our voices, if you have some ideas, if you're like, well, Angela, I don't know how to use this software. I may not know how to do it, but I can maybe find somebody who does,
Yeah, exactly.
Let us know because it's all about teaching each other so that we can all become stronger in our knowledge and better at what we're doing.
Exactly.
And we can actually have a career that we love, This is something that I love doing, and I would like to be able to become as good at it as possible so that I can continue to do it. I want to be like Miss Beverly Jenkins, 30 years. I want to be just like that. So it has been such a pleasure, Moni, and definitely, we are gonna, we're gonna stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. But thanks so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you are welcome. I'm so glad you accepted it. I'm so glad. And to everybody out there who are listening to our voices, this is Moni Boyce, and I am Angela K. Austin. Definitely look her up, find her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Find me, follow us, say hi, like, share, comment, do all the good things. Thank you guys. See you all again soon.
Bye.